Hello, lovely viewers. You are most welcome to our channel Poetry Online. In this video, we shall be discussing the summary, analysis, themes, and characters of The Lion and the Jewel by wole Soyinka. Kindly subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to get updates on all our new videos. Once again, let us assure you of a very interesting discussion. Get ready for this lesson. Let us begin our discussion with the title of the book, The Lion and the Jewel. What do they symbolize? A lion is an animal which is revered because of its majestic movement and its title as the king of the jungle. It can hunt both smaller and larger prey. A jewel, on the other hand, is a beautiful ornament worn around the neck. It complements women's beauty when they adorn it on their necks. In the play, Barunka commands an aura of authority, thus fitting the title of a lion. Sidi is the jewel of Ilunjili because of her unrivaled beauty. The play is the story of an elderly man hunting a beautiful girl to diminish her rising influence in the village, which is threatening his authoritative influence in the village. In the village of Ilunjili, with its flourishing traditional customs and tradition, a village which may be said not to have been ready to experience modernity, there lived a ballet and traditional ruler, Barunka, his head wife Sadiku, the village belle Sidi, and the 23-year-old teacher Lakunle. Barunka, as representative of tradition, still lives within the dictates of the Yoruba culture, avoiding modernity as far as possible, while patronizing polygamy and protecting tradition to the extent that he bribed against Ilunjili springing up as a modern environment. Sadiku is Barunka's head wife, who seems to be comfortable with her place among the lion's harem. So comfortable is she that she is willing to welcome yet another wife, Sidi, for Barunka. She not only carries out the function of informing Sidi that her husband wants to marry her, she eventually makes it possible for the 62-year-old traditional ruler to achieve his aim. Lakunle is a school teacher who is fond of Sidi, whom he wants to introduce to civilization. He wants Sidi to be his wife, but he's not ready or prepared to pay her bride price. It is in this state of affairs that Barunka, whom Lakunle despises so much, appears ready to contest for Sidi's hand in marriage, with a far younger school teacher who has the advantage of modern education, youthfulness, and probably vigor. Because of Sidi's vanity, Barunka sends across a decoy. Thus, he has turned impotent. He announces this to the outside world through his flippant headwife Sadiku, but it was all a bait to catch Sidi. Sidi, who is now so full of herself, because her pictures now adorn the magazines and are now an object of desire for men, falls for the lure and goes to visit Barunka in order to mock him sexually. In this process, she loses her virginity and is prepared to marry the old man while dumping Lakunle, whom she considers to be a watered-down version of himself. It is often claimed that wole Soyinka's The Lion and the Jewel presents a conflict between African tradition on one hand and Western civilization or modernity on the other. This is true in part, but it is just a simplification. The play combines a number of themes and conflicts into one. There is the already mentioned conflict between tradition and modernity. There is also the conflict between the young and the old. And there is a conflict between men and women, the age-old battle of the sexes. The conflict between Lakunle and Barunka represents the crisis of modernity versus tradition. But when Lakunle and Sidi clash at the beginning of the play, it is also the battle of the sexes in addition to modernity versus tradition. And when Sidi goes to town the supposedly impotent Barunka, we find there is a combination of youth versus old and women against men, as well as modernity versus tradition. In the end, it is not the old man who is shown up to be impotent, but a young Lakunle who is symbolically revealed as incapable of securing the affection of the beautiful maiden. Thus, in the end, the conflict between young and old, men and women, tradition and modernity all become one, each is an aspect of the other. The very first thing the reader notices in the dramatist's very elaborate stage direction is the contrast in the appearance of the two characters, thus Sidi and Lakunle. Sidi's outfit is simple, but emphasizes her beauty, her seductiveness, and charm. The impression she gives is that she is unspoiled, perhaps like the African continent. In contrast, Lakunle's clothing is incongruous in its effect. It is a contradictory jumble of odds and ends. The details of his attire are symbolic in a sense. They convey a message about Lakunle's position on the whole question of modernity versus tradition. Lakunle thinks himself as a modern man, but his suit is an old-style English one, threadbare but not ragged, clean but not ironed, and obviously a size or two too small. There is something not quite right about Lakunle's appearance, which is best expressed in the tennis shoes he is wearing with his suit. He is like a man in borrowed clothing. His very attire shows that he does not understand the Western culture he thinks he is an expert in, or the Western culture he thinks he is perpetrating or preaching. When Lakunle begins to talk, we soon realize that he is a man addicted to words. Thus, he is addicted to English words in particular. Even though he seeks to show himself off as a cultured, learned, intelligent and witty man who is in touch with the white man's way of wooing a girl, and who is full of the white man's knowledge, he only succeeds in ridiculing himself. Thus, his language is extremely excessive. In contrast, Sidi speaks with simple dignity and common sense. She knows where she belongs and is not impressed by Lakunle's newfangled notions. She consents to be his wife, but only if he does that which is needful, thus paying her bride price. The first confrontation between Lakunle and Sidi is what is technically known as the exposition, during which the author sets the plot rolling and introduces the elements which he will develop to a climax and bring to a resolution. Let us see how Wole Soyinka sets the scene. What is the basics of the conflict between Sidi and Lakunle, and how is the humor brought out? At their very first meeting in the beginning of the play, Lakunle, believing that a modern gentleman should not stand by and watch a woman carrying a load, offers to take the bucket which Sidi is carrying with accustomed ease. His act, however, turns out to be a clumsy gesture of misguided chivalry, and he only succeeds in spilling the water on himself. When Sidi complains and asks him if he is not ashamed of the mess he has caused, his response is rather crude, indicating that he is not as refined, or he is not the sophisticated gentleman he thinks he is. Lakunle says, "That is what the stew pot said to the fire. Have you no shame? At your age, licking my bottom." But she was tickled just the same. With every action or speech, Lakunle makes the audience or readers to laugh harder. But the laughter is at his own expense. Nothing he does is right, or nothing he says is right. In his next speech, he reveals something about his so-called learning. There may well be something in what Lakunle is saying about the effect of heavy loads on the spine, but Lakunle exaggerates it to the point that it becomes absurd, diminishing its impact and making the readers to laugh harder. Lakunle says, "I told you not to carry loads on your head, but you are as stubborn as an illiterate goat. It is bad for your spine, and it shortens your neck, so that very soon you will have no neck at all." He then complains about the way Sidi is dressed. In his view, her simple attire exposes too much of her to the common gaze. However, one is not sure whether his objection is based on his own notion of how civilized women dress, or whether it is motivated by his jealousy over the fact that other men can see part of Sidi's breast. She resolves by telling him that it is he who is the object of public ridicule, and his response is that savages like Sidi do not appreciate him. Again, his misguided conceit is laughable. Lakunle says, "For that, what is a jewel to pigs? If now I am misunderstood by you and your race of savages, I rise above towns and remain unruffled." In his next speech, which is meant to show more of his learning, he declares the superiority of men over women. This is a ridiculous view, which he claims has been proven by science, but which in fact exposes him as a man with very old-fashioned ideas on the question of gender equality and not at all the modern progressive man he thinks he is. Lakunle says, "Please don't be angry with me. I didn't mean you in particular. And anyway, it isn't what I say. The scientists have proved it. It's in my books. Women have a smaller brain than men. That's why they are called the weaker sex." Sidi's response to Lakunle's scientific claim offers a good starting point for beginning an examination on a character. While he tries so hard to be bookish and to appear learned, she deflates him easily with simple common sense. She asks Lakunle, "How can you say women are weak when we do all the hard work in the home?" And indeed, this remark is typical of her. She refuses to be impressed by Lakunle's fancy ideas and maintains her belief in what she's used to, finding Lakunle a little crazy, and he really does sound a little unbalanced when he begins wooing her in a highly melodramatic, cheaply romantic language which he rightly describes as nonsense. Lakunle says, "Sidi, my love, will you open your mind like the chase leaf in the morning when the sun first touches it?" Sidi replies by saying, "If you start that, I will run away. I had enough of that nonsense yesterday." One thing that is so obvious is that his language is taken from books and his words are so second-hand that one doubts their sincerity. The truth is that Lakunle and Sidi are totally mismatched. The man lives in a world of words and half-understood books and ideas. The girl, on the other hand, is totally sensible, with a feet firmly planted in a native soil and culture. Indeed, her position is simple. Not having brought up on notions of romantic love, she says she will agree to marry Lakunle if he will pay the bride price. At this point, he launches into another outrageous verbal attack on the institution of bride price, an attack which, far from hurting the institution, only serves to expose the so-called scholar's lexical limitations. Lakunle says, "A savage custom, barbaric, outdated, rejected, denounced, accursed, excommunicated, archaic, degrading, humiliating, unspeakable, redundant, retrogressive, remarkable, unpalatable." Sidi replies by saying, "Why did you stop? Is the bag empty?" Lakunle says, "I own a shorter companion dictionary. I have ordered a longer one. You wait." Part of Lakunle's problem is that he is in love with words for their own sake and wants to use them whether they are appropriate or not. In a sense, his mastery of English words is uncertain as his mastery of the Western culture that he claims to represent. His version of modern married life is quite ridiculous. He undermines himself when he says that his children will eat the leavings on his plate, just as his notion of a fashionable wife with red paint on her lips is quite ridiculous. Lakunle says, "I will not have you wait on me till I have done my field. No wife of mine, no lawful wedded wife shall eat the leavings off my plate. That is for the children. I want to walk beside you in the street, side by side and arm in arm, just like the Lagos couples I have seen. High heel shoes for the lady, red paint on her lips, and her hair is stretched like a magazine photo." Lakunle is constantly undermining himself without realizing it. And this is one of the reasons why he is so funny. This is an aspect of wole Soyinka's wit. He makes Lakunle say something which sounds quite sensible at first, and then makes him go on to spoil the effect of what he said earlier. When the news comes that Sidi's picture, taken by a photographer from Lagos, have been used in a glamour magazine, her response is interesting. Up to that moment, she has been a sensible and modest young woman, firmly rooted in the customs and traditions of her community. However, on hearing of the photos, she reveals a youthful vanity that has not been apparent before. She begins to think that she is too good for a mere village school teacher, and she is especially thrilled that she is given greater prominence in the magazine than the Bali, the Lion of Ilinjili. Sidi says, "Sidi is more important, even than the Bali, more famous than the panther of the trees. He is beneath me now, your fearless rake, the scourge of womanhood. But now he shares a corner of the leaf with the lowest of the low, with a dark out village latrine. She seems to share Lakunle's obsession to the old village chief, who seems to have a reputation as a great seducer of women and an enemy of progress. The dance which comes at this point in the play marks the end of the first act and celebrates the vanity of youthfulness, especially Sidi's youth and beauty, which seems to have triumphed certainly over Lakunle and temporarily over Barunka as well. But Sidi's triumph over Barunka is one that will be reversed. Now, the entrance of Barunka towards the end of the first act represents what is known technically as a complication, in which the plot is advanced a stage further. What we see at this stage is not just a confrontation between the misguided Lakunle, who believes himself to be a modern and civilized man, and the sensible but youthful Sidi. A third factor has entered the conflict in the person of the crafty Barunka. This old man too wants the girl. Contemplating Sidi's picture in the magazine, he nods slowly to himself and declares, "Yes, yes, it is 5 full moons since I last took a wife." Let's now take the summary of the first act of the play, which is titled Morning. In Act 1, the stage is set in the Nigerian Yoruba village of Ilinjili. At center stage is a schoolhouse, where children reciting their timetables can be heard through an open window. A beautiful young woman, Sidi, appears on stage with a pail of water balanced on her head. Immediately, the schoolmaster Lakunle rushes out to help her, warning her that heavy loads on her neck will shorten her neck. He also chastises Sidi for walking around with her shoulders exposed. Sidi laughs and says that it shouldn't matter what she looks like, because Lakunle has sworn to love her no matter what. Their conversation turns to Lakunle's long-standing marriage proposal. He has been begging Sidi to marry him, but she won't consider his proposal until he pays her bride price, a tradition in their village. Lakunle, on the other hand, who has been educated in the capital, believes himself to be a modern man, refuses to go by this tradition. As they argue, a village girl runs in shouting for Sidi. The announcement that the foreign man who had visited their village previously has returned. Through their conversation, it's revealed that a foreigner stopped in their village. He took photographs of villagers and returns now with a book he made of the photographs. The girl reports that a gorgeous photograph of Sidi has been used on the cover, which has made the ballet both proud and envious. A photograph of Barunka himself was included, but it was made to look small and old, standing next to the village latrine. Sidi delights that she is more important even than the ballet. She calls excitedly to dance, the dance of the lost traveler, in which they act out a retelling of the photographer's arrival. She casts Lakunle as the traveler himself. Drummers strike up a beat, and the dancers swirl around Lakunle, transporting the audience back in time to witness the traveler's arrival. Although he had resisted playing along at first, Lakunle quickly gets himself in the role, not even noticing when the ballet arrives. His presence breaks up the dance, with Lakunle the last to notice. Sidi excitedly rushes towards the village square to find the traveler himself. As she leaves, the ballet laments that it's been 5 months since he last took a wife. Let's now continue our analysis with Act 2, which is titled Noon. The Act 2 of the play, Noon, advances the plot in a number of significant ways. At the opening of the act, Lakunle seems to be completely defeated by the triumphant Sidi, who appears to be getting the better of Barunka as well. But this act also brings out something in Sidi that we didn't see earlier. She seems to have been influenced by Lakunle's new ideas. She is not as deferential towards tradition as she had appeared earlier to be. Act 2 opens with Lakunle following Sidi and carrying a bundle of firewood, which she should, according to the custom, be carrying. This is a reversal of what should normally be happening. Again, Lakunle thinks he is being modern, but he is misguided and without dignity, particularly as Sidi shows neither appreciation nor respect for what he does. He is playing the role of a woman, and indeed, throughout the scene, he is hardly a man. Sidi treats him like a child, asking him to be quiet and not to be tiresome. However, her reproaches only provoke him to more ridiculous behavior. He gets down on his knees, for this is his idea of European romance, and begins to cover Sidi's hand with kisses, calling her all manner of biblical names, which of course mean absolutely nothing to her. Lakunle says, "My Ruth, my Rahel, Esther, Bathsheba, thou psalm of fable perfection, from Genesis to Revelation, listen not to the voices of this infidel." Lakunle talks as if beauty can only be described in terms of foreign women, and clearly he has what can best be described as colonial mentality. And as usual, Sidi's answer is a straightforward rejection of this attitude. Sidi replies by saying, "Now that's your other game, giving me funny names to pick out from your wretched books. My name is Sidi, and now let me be. My name is Sidi, and I am beautiful." It is at this stage, when the young girl is filled with conceit, that Sadiku announces to her that her husband Baronka wishes to marry her. But Sidi is at the moment too intoxicated with her own newly discovered beauty to consider Baronka's offer. Indeed, at the moment, she does not think there's any man on earth who is good enough for her. Wole Soyinka is gently making fun of the vanity of youth. The way Sidi worships herself is quite amusing. She says, "To think I took no notice of my velvet skin, how smooth it is, and no man ever thought to praise the fullness of my breast. See, I hold them to the warm caress," and cautiously pushes out her chest of desire-filled sun. Sadiku attempts to tempt Sidi with a description of the kind of life that awaits her as the old chief's wife, but ironically, Sadiku begins by telling the young girl that she will enjoy when a prospective husband dies. Persuading a girl to marry a man by telling her what she will stand to gain when her husband dies is ridiculous. It is here that Sidi reveals that she has learned something from Lakunle. She seems to have acquired a quite untraditional disregard for the authority and dignity of the chief. Sidi says, "He seeks to have me as his property, where I must fade beneath his jealous hold. Ah, Sadiku, the schoolmaster here has taught me certain things, and my images have taught me all the rest." Sidi seems here to see the chief not as the revered custodian of the tradition of the people, but in much the same way as Lakunle sees him, as a pampered dirty old man who flatters his dying manhood by possessing young girls. Sidi's disrespect for the chief shocks the traditional-minded Sadiku, who blames Lakunle for it. Civically, Lakunle retreats in panic as Sadiku advances on him, and it is Sidi who rescues him from her. It is clear from this scene that Sidi uses language in a more effective manner than Lakunle. Her images have more freshness and power for the simple reason that they are more original and drawn from her immediate environment, unlike Lakunle's, which are second-hand, taken from books. This is evident in her description of her own vital youthfulness as opposed to Baronka's decayed old age. Sidi says, "Compare my image and your lord's, an age of difference. See how the water glistens on my face, like the dew-moistened leaves on a Hamatan morning. But his face is like a leather piece, torn rudely from the saddle of his horse." Sadiku gasped, "Sprinkled with the musty ashes from a pipe that is long oversmoked. Sadiku, I am young and brimming. He is spent. I am the twinkle of a jewel, but he is the hindquarter of a lion." The final images of Baronka is especially cheeky. The chief, who likes to see himself as a lion, is described by Sidi as merely a part of the carcass of the animal. And when Sadiku plays the last card, asking the young beauty if she will at least have supper with Barunka. Sidi's response is hilarious because it is so unconventional. Surely, Sidi knows that the fact that Barunka is married is not an issue here. In the traditional polygamous situation, he can marry as many women as he wishes. Sidi is merely playing the coquette when she says she does not sup with married men. Lakunle, ever jealous of Barunka, then recounts the story, told in a mime, of how the old chief prevented a railway, a symbol of progress, from passing through Ilunjili, suggesting thereby that Barunka is an enemy of progress. But there are two things wrong with Lakunle's account. First of all, Barunka is not there to defend himself, and when later in the play he presents his point of view, we find that he's not exactly against progress. Secondly, Lakunle's excessive language as usual has the effect of making his story ridiculous. Lakunle says, "They marked the route with stakes, ate through the jungle, and began the tracks. Trade, progress, adventure, success, civilization, fame, international conspicuosity. It was all within the grasp of Ilunjili." Once again, the pompous expression, international conspicuosity, takes away from the seriousness of what he is saying. Besides, he betrays here his own envy of the old chief and wants to know the secret of Barunka's success with women. He senses quite rightly that the old man has something he does not have. Lakunle says, "Ah, I sometimes wish I led his kind of life. Such luscious bosom make his nightly pillow. I am sure he keeps a timetable just as I do at school. Only way to ensure fair play. He must be healthy to keep going as he does. I don't know what the women see in him. His eyes are small and always red with wine. He must possess some secret. No, I do not envy him. Just the one woman for me. Alone I stand for progress." Act 2 closes with a scene in which we see Barunka, the lion of Ilunjili, in bed, being ministered unto by his current favorite. It is important to note that even the old chief does not escape Wole Soyinka's satirical treatment. Satire is a literary art of exposing certain kinds of human behavior to ridicule or mockery with a view, perhaps, of correcting them. It is obvious that, throughout, the play is a satire on the kind of Africans who adopt Western attitude without understanding them, and who as a result is neither one nor the other. In this scene, however, it is the old ruler Barunka who is shown to be overpampered and spoiled. He is lying in his bed, having the hairs from his armpit pulled out by his current favorite. He endures this quite painful operation with a sensual ah, as presumably intended to show how tough he is. But the scene also displays his excessive sensuality. Indeed, the whole scene is Wole Soyinka's satirical portrait of the traditional African ruler, showing his excessive love of pleasure and his overindulgence in it. Sadiku comes in at this point to inform Barunka of Sidi's impudent refusal of his offer. First, he is outraged and makes a speech in which he proclaims all the great feats he has performed in recent months, including his strength in bed. Barunka says, "Do any of my wife report a failing of my manliness? The strongest of them also wearies long before the lion does, and so would she, had I the briefest chance to teach this unfledged birdling that lack of wisdom to embrace the richness madness of age." In his angry frustration, his cunning mind conceives a plan. He announces, with a great show of confidentiality, to Sadiku that he is in fact impotent. Barunka says, "The time has come when I can fool myself no more. I am no man, Sadiku. My manhood ended near a week ago." Sadiku's response to Barunka's announcement is the point where the sexual theme, the theme of the battle of the sexes, is made more explicit. She is happy about Barunka's supposed impotence and sees it as a victory for women. In her view, it is women who always win, Though men rave and brag about their strength, the final victory, she claims, goes always to the silent women, who are in reality the strong ones. With each act, the plot is carried forward with the introduction of another factor. Baronka's rumored impotence will certainly entice a curious Sidi to come and mock him, and in that confrontation, the play will come to its climax and move swiftly to its resolution. Let's now take a summary of Act 2, which is titled Noon. Sidi appears on stage, holding the photography book, engrossed in her own image. Lakunle follows behind, carrying firewood. Sadiku, Baronka's first wife, an old woman with a shawl over her head, enters from the other side of the stage and greets Sidi, startling her out of a reverie. She wastes no time, speaking the ballet's proposal. He would like to take Sidi as his wife. Lakunle rushes forward in protest, but Sidi silences him and laughs in Sadiku's face. She continues praising her own beauty, stroking the photographs, bragging that she's far too beautiful for Baronka, whom she compares to a leather piece. Shocked at Sidi's disrespect towards the king, Sadiku storms off, but quickly circles back, saying that Baronka anticipated that Sidi might turn down his proposal, but hopes that she will join him for dinner that evening anyway. Sidi claims to know all about Baronka's little suppers, where beautiful women come to dine and end up as wife or concubine. Lakunle asks that they must call Baronka the fox or something. Sadiku tries to defend the ballet against these lies, but Lakunle won't stop. He says that Baronka wants everything its own way, which is why he refuses to modernize the village. He remembers hearing a story of prospectors trying to build a road near the village that would have created easy trade with Lagos, but Baronka paid them to move the road elsewhere. The scene changes to Baronka's bedroom, where one of his wives, called the favorite, plucks his armpit hairs. Baronka gently criticizes his wife's method of plucking the hair, complaining that she doesn't rub the armpit long enough before plucking, and that her pull is too gentle. He says she shouldn't worry about hurting the panther of the trees when the favorite promises to improve. Baronka tells her not to bother. He will have a new wife soon to take over the task. Just then, Sadiku arrives. The favorite is dismissed, and Sadiku delivers the news that Sidi has refused Baronka's proposal. At first, Baronka rages that a girl such as Sidi should be grateful to have the attention of such a manly man. He lists his recent physical accomplishments, such as Loch Torsen and Leopard Hansen, but then sinks to the bed. Let's now move to Act 3, which is titled Ninth. The first thing the readers notices when Sidi and Baronka begin to exchange words is that, despite the ballet's age, the two of them are more evenly matched than Sidi and Lakunle, who are both young. The verbal contest between them is more subtle and indeed wittier, so that they are able to get at each other without seeming to, until they finally arrive at a point where the younger one is compelled to appreciate the wisdom of the older. Sidi does not appreciate the point at first, but the first thing we learn about Baronka when Sidi enters his palace is that he is in fact learning to move with the times. His servants have formed a union, the Palace Workers' Union, and once a week they take the day off. Sidi rather impudently asks if it is a day off for Baronka's wives too. She wants to jump to the conclusion that Baronka's wives have abandoned their positions in the house because he is somehow incapable of satisfying them. She is disappointed to learn that Baronka's latest favorite, Aliatu's offense to her husband, consists in nothing more than the inaptitude in pulling the hairs from Baronka's armpits. Sidi was hoping Aliatu's offense had a sexual origin. Baronka, who at this point is engaged in a wrestling match, a symbol, no doubt, of his potency, both as a man and a representative of tradition. He deliberately gives all his attention to the contest he is engaged in, as though the young girl who has entered his room is of no interest to him whatsoever. Sidi's expedition, which she undertakes for the purpose of taunting Baronka, gets off to a weak start when Baronka pretends that He is unaware of her refusal of his marriage proposal and of his invitation of her to have supper with him, since the Diku has brought no reply. The young woman is especially hurt that Baronka calls her an unwanted stranger and belittles her even further when he says, "Is a man's bedroom to be made naked to any flea that chances to wander through?" Baronka clearly wins the initial onslaught, but Sidi is determined to taunt him about his alleged impotence. So she renews the attack. Surely, she argues, Baronka's current favorite would not have abandoned her post unless she was in some way dissatisfied with her husband. And here, she is suggesting that the old chief is unable of satisfying his wife sexually. But again, Baronka easily parries the impudent assault. He does not concern himself with the petty purposes of his wives. Sidi then decides to take the side of Baronka's opponent to the wrestling exercise in which the chief is engaged in. But what is interesting is that she gives a reason for her choice in a proverb. If the tortoise cannot tumble, it does not mean that he can stand. To which Baronka responds with another proverb. When the child is full of riddles, his mother has one water pot the less. Sidi continues the verbal attack with an offensive description of a hypothetical suitor, even though it is obvious to Baronka that he is the one being described. For instance, when asked if the presumptive suitor is rich, she responds that rumor has it that he is so. If repulsive, she responds that he is old and this makes Baronka wins. Asked if the man is miserly, Sidi responds that there is a rumor that he developed a taste for ground corn and pepper because he was too mean to spend money on snuff. This allegation so angers Baronka that he protests vigorously, forgetting that Sidi is supposedly only discussing a hypothetical suitor. With a sudden burst of energy, he lifts his opponents in the wrestling match over his shoulder, a clear symbolic indication of how Sidi's presence serves to boost his powers. Too late he recollects himself and claims to have been upset on behalf of the supposed suitor because he himself has been victim of the kind of malicious gossip. The question and answer session gets really interesting when she is asked if the supposed suitor has been a productive parent. Her answer to this question is, once upon a time. Pressed to explain the cryptic answer, she says, again alluding to Baronka's alleged impotence, that he is too tired with the day's affair that he tends his buttocks to his wives. When Baronka suggests that perhaps the suitor or the husband has strength mindful of years to come, that is, the suitor uses his strength sparingly and wisely, Sidi in a clear pun insists that a man's first duty is to husband his wives, that is, to satisfy his wives sexually, and again she suggests that Baronka has lost his sexual powers. In the exchange between Sidi and Baronka, she shows a more mature and deeper aspect of her character, not to mention her more nibbled intelligence that has been evident in a squabble with Lakunle. It is as if Lakunle is not capable of bringing out her best, while in the verbal feud with Baronka, Sidi is able to match the traditional and proverbial language of the old man. An example is found in this exchange when Baronka, complaining of the immodesty of modern African women, asks her. Baronka says, "Now my Sidi, you have not caught this new and strange disease, I hope." Sidi replies by saying, "The treading of my smoke. Does Baronka not know the marking of the village loom?" Baronka replies by saying, "But will Sidi, the pride of mothers, will she always wear it?" Sidi replies by saying, "Will Sidi, the proud daughter of Baronka, will she step out naked?" What is fascinating about Sidi's response is the way she picks up on Baronka's own words and images and bend them to her advantage. Thus, more than ever before, she emerges as someone who is deeply versed in the traditions of her people, a girl who has been properly brought up to speak and behave in accordance with the customs and traditions. Thus, at the end of this exchange, Barunka, who had regarded her as just another silly modern girl, is obliged to say, "To think that I once thought Sidi in the eyes delight, but she is vain, and her head is feather light, and always giddy with trivial thoughts, and now I find her deep and wise beyond her years." And it is at this point that Barunka begins to reveal to her and to the audience his real position in the clash of modernity versus tradition. What we discover is that, though Barunka is a traditionalist, he is not dead set against progress, as Lakunle has led us to believe. Indeed, he makes it clear to the surprise of Sidi and incidentally to the wrestler that he is for progress, provided certain precautions are taken. He leads Sidi to the machine for making stamps, which he has caused the village blacksmith to manufacture and which he designed himself. The symbolic meaning of the machine is clear. He could have imported a device for his village, but he prefers one which comes from the village itself. In his view, progress must be built on tradition. It must be an organic development of what there is already, and not something foisted or forced upon the village as Lakunle seeks to do. Barunka says, "The word, dear child, of the palace blacksmith, built in full secrecy, all is not well with it. I will find the cause, and then Ilunjili will boast its own tax on paper, made with stamp like this. For long I dreamt it, and here it stands, child of my thoughts." Next, he reveals to the younger struck woman that the stamp to be printed by the machine will bear a picture of Sidi's face, rather than the impersonal images which are found on other stamps. In other words, he seeks a more human kind of progress, but more importantly, Sidi's face and Barunka's mind, which invented the machine, thus combine to symbolize the way of the future, a combination of the young and old, or the new and the old. He complains that progress tends to make everything look the same. Modern products, thus houses, cars, dresses, tend to have no individuality because they are mass-produced. It is this lack of individuality he detests, not progress itself. Barunka says, "I do not hate progress, only its nature, which makes all roofs and faces look the same. And the wish of one old man is that, here and there, goes progressively towards Sidi, until he bends over here on the bed, among the bridges and the Medros roads, below the humming bird, which smokes the face of Sango, the spender of the snake tongue lighten, between this moment and a reckless broom, that will be welded in these years to come. We must leave virgin plots of life, rich decay, and tongue of vapor, rising from forgotten heaps of compost, lying undisturbed." To counteract the boring sameness of modernity, Barunka proposes that some items from the past should be preserved to add dignity and variety to the awful sameness which progress might otherwise bring. It is worth noting that the picture of the future that Barunka paints is not a glorious one. Yes, there will be aeroplanes and easy road access from one place to another, but he described the routes as medros, referring to the motor accident. He also talks about the mass adoption of Western culture that characterizes Africans' notion of progress. It is to be noticed that, as Barunka reveals his notion of progress, he also sexually seduces Sidi. Interestingly, as the old man describes his vision of the future, the young woman observes quite rightly that he speaks almost like the school teacher, except that his words fly in a different path. And Barunka agrees. Barunka says, "The proof of wisdom is the wish to learn even from children, and the haste of youth must learn its temper from the glows of ancient ladder, from the strength of knit clothes along the grain. The school teacher and I must learn one from the other. Is this not right?" And this really is Barunka's message. The old must adapt and take in the new, and similarly, the young must learn to benefit from the experiences of the old, and the new must be directed by tradition. Lakunle's weakness is that he possesses no tradition on which to build anew. His modernity is based on nothing. He is thus bound to lack the strength or vigor, or to use the metaphor of the play, he is bound to lack the potency. And so, the final act of the play, in which Sidi set out to town the supposedly impotent old man, concludes as her head falls slowly on the ballet's shoulder. Clearly, Sidi has been seduced by the power of Baronka's superior vision of the future, which of course comes from the ability to combine the new and the old, the lion and the jewel. The rest of the play is designed to restore its comic structure. Laquenle, with characteristic melodrama, expresses anxiety and fear about what Baronka has done to Sidi, who has gone all night, while Sadiku calmly enjoys his antiques. Laquenle says, "He's killed her. I warned you. You know him, and I warned you." The drummers and dancers, who come on at this point, merely serves to increase the dramatic irony of the moment. The dance celebrates the defeat of Baronka, with Sadiku as the chief celebrant, and Laquenle enjoys the performance, but the audience know that the ballet is not impotent and has in fact succeeded in annexing the jewel. Laquenle's histrionics, when Sidi finally emerges on stage, are therefore very funny to the audience. Laquenle says, "But Sidi, did you escape?" Louder still from Sidi, "Tell me the worst. I'll take it like a man. Is it the fright which affects you so, or did he?" For a brief moment, Laquenle appears noble when he offers to marry Sidi, knowing that she has been deflowered by Baronka. Laquenle says, "Man takes the fallen woman by the hand, and ever after they live happily. Moreover, I will admit, it solves the problem of a bride price too." But Laquenle spoils the moment. He apparently has an ulterior motive for offering to marry Sidi. As it turns out to be, Sidi does not want to marry him anyway, not after being with the old man, the Lion of Ilingili, and so the play ends with a prospect of a wedding between Sidi and Baronka, with the entire village in a festive celebration, and with Laquenle happily pursuing another young girl. This is the typical ending of a comedy. The major themes in Wole Soyinka's The Lion and the Jewel include the following: tradition versus modernization, gender roles, marriage and power, bride price, and polygamy. Thanks for watching this video. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video.